guys, it's Chris, aka Beauty and the Vape, and I am here with Very Vocal Vapers. We are doing our first Zoom room interview here, and so this is super, super exciting. This is John, and John is from California, and he wants to tell his vape story. So John, I have a couple questions, if you don't mind, to get us started. How long did you smoke for, or when did you start smoking?
Believe it or not, I am probably, or at least to me, I feel like I've smoked for the least amount of time, but I smoked for half a year, and I started at, I believe, the age of 22.
Okay.
At the time, I just picked up smoking, and I was under a lot of anxiety. Thought, smoking, sure, why not? It's going to relieve my anxiety. Little did I know it would actually form into something more than just that. And it ended up being really pretty much one of the worst mistakes of my life that I would really consider.
Right. So you were I was a late bloomer myself. So, but that is actually really good that you only smoked for half a year. So it's like you realized the mistake and you had the opportunity through vaping to immediately correct it. That's really good. So you smoked for about half a year. When did you start vaping? What year? Do you remember?
Let's see if I can remember the date correctly. Well, not the date, the year.
I was going to say I can't do my date either.
I believe it was... Oh yeah, since I've been vaping for 2 years now. So it was in 2015 that I started vaping.
Okay.
And I was in treatment at the time, just for health reasons, and one of my buddies there, who was a vapor, he was like, bro, why would you smoke cigarettes? Just try my vape, and I guarantee you'll not look at another cigarette again. So, sure enough, I was open to it. I was kind of skeptical. I thought, vaping, like, this is gonna help me.
Had you heard of it before?
I had. That was actually one of the things I considered, just like vaping zero nic, and just to cope with anxiety. So, like, I never did it. But he gave me his setup, so I tried it, and I realized, oh my god, I'd rather take this over vaping. I mean, not vaping, smoking.
We're smoking, right. It's like, this actually tastes good. Like, this is...
Yeah. It was also at that time, I mean, because I started quickly working up to, like, a pack and a half a day smoking. And that was only over the course of half a year.
Yeah.
I quickly grew up to that amount. Of course, I started getting short-winded just on little walks. And I realized, oh, this is not good.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? In like such a short period of time. So that just tells you the damage that it does in a short period of time. Never mind people who've smoked 30 years. I mean, I just went to a wedding and people are like, I smoked, I've been smoking for 40 years or whatever. And I'm like, ooh, I don't want to see your lungs. Uh-oh.
It definitely was crazy, and I didn't realize the extent that I was smoking. Looking back at it now, I realize that every time I was anxious, it's like, oh, it's time for a cigarette. Something triggered me or rubbed me the wrong way. Oh, what better thing to do than smoke a cigarette? And just went on and on. Wasn't really a good thing, but now that I've discovered vaping, like, I can pretty much go hours without any nicotine at all in my system.
Well, that's like really wise too, that you had, you seem to have so much insight, not only of yourself, but, to know what your triggers were and stuff like that. It's, I know that, and I've heard, in this journey, there's, in fact, when we went to Foxwoods, there was a couple girls who had never smoked before, yet they used vaping for anxiety. And I suffer from anxiety and panic attacks, and I was like, wow, I never even thought of that. But like you said, you get anxious, have a cigarette. I mean, and thinking back now, I'm like, wow, like if I wish I had known back then that this was even a thing, because that would have been such a better alternative. And the fact that you only, did it for, smoked for around 6 months, that's great, because it then tends to develop into just habitual. You know what I mean? Then it's, you add things on, like, okay, I just ate, let's have a cigarette. I just woke up, let's have a cigarette. I'm driving in the car, I'm bored, let's have a cigarette. So, I mean, the fact that you could pinpoint what your triggers are that's really, really awesome. Do you remember what device and nicotine strength you started on? So what was your first setup, and what nicotine strength?
Oh gosh. My first device that I ever purchased was an IPV Mini V2 with an Arctic Horizon tank. And I believe I started on, it was either 12 milligram or 18 milligram juice. And that alone didn't cut it for me. So I bumped it up to 24 milligrams. And just over the course of like a year, I was cutting down, dropped down to 18, dropped down to 16, went back up to 18. I mean, I didn't always have success.
Right.
Sticking to lower nicotine.
Mm-hmm.
Went back up to 24, back down to 18s, and just the whole titration.
And I think that's what people need to understand too. I think that's brings up a really good point, is that you're not necessarily going to get it right. Not that there's a right or wrong, but you're not necessarily going to get your magical moment the first time. And so I think people, I know people that I've tried to convert, they, this doesn't work. Well, you have to fool around with it. You have to fool around with the nick. You have to fool around with what you're vaping on. You have to, there's a whole lot of, stuff that goes into the equation. Anybody out there, if you're thinking of quitting and you want to try vaping, just realize that. I think it's really important for people to understand that it's not a magic wand that you have to find. And I think that's great. It's like you have to find out what works for you. And I love that part of the diversity also in the vaping community, that it doesn't matter what you're vaping on. It doesn't matter the milligrams. It doesn't matter what device. Like you mentioned your first device. I think I have that up there, up unopened somewhere. Your first device. And it doesn't matter as long as you're not smoking. And that comes to my next question. So are you still using that nicotine strength, or have you dropped down even further?
Oh, no. I've definitely dropped down further.
Okay, so what are you on now?
Right now I'm on 3 milligrams of nicotine, and I'm actually considering to drop down even lower, because I realize that it's not necessarily that I need nicotine. I mean, will I quit using nicotine? I don't know, but I don't always need it all the time.
Right. So for you, it's more the act of, it's not necessarily
Right.
the nicotine. So, and mine probably is too. I just noticed that I'm on 3, but I noticed that 3 it doesn't do me any harm either. So, but so you're down to 3, and you might,
You might drop down to like
1.5 or
1.5,
something like that. And I also think that's great too, that manufacturers now, obviously, probably even when you started, a lot of people didn't offer 1.5s.
Right.
Finding more and more companies that are now offering 1.5s, I think is great. So I think that's great. And then on the other end of the spectrum too, now with all the closed devices that are coming on the markets too, they're offering higher nicks. and the Nick salts and stuff like that too. So, I mean, I think just the innovation of everything and the fact that the businesses are actually listening to the consumers and everything like that, I think is really great. So so from my understanding, you don't smoke at all anymore.
I do not smoke at all.
Okay. And did you ever dual use? Like when you were getting used to things, were you dual using?
I was not a dual user. I went straight right into vaping.
Okay.
And that actually was really difficult. I mean, because I was in treatment at the time, and I had a vape on me, and I still had cigarettes left over. And they'd ask, "Oh, do you want cigarettes or do you want your vape?" I'm like, "Oh, I could have a cigarette. I could have one, but no, I'm gonna try this vaping." So it took a lot of effort. I asked for my vape every single time I got asked that question.
That's great though. I mean that you had the choice. It's not like you didn't have cigarettes, so you had the choice and you still chose the vape over the cigarettes. I'm very proud of you, by the way. That's awesome.
Thank you.
There's no judgments here. I mean, I never judge anybody. I am no one to judge. I am not a perfect person. I have done some really crappy things to myself in my life and made horrible choices. So even when people are like, when I ask that question, do you dual use? They're like, you can see, they're like, I don't want to answer that. There's no judgments. There's absolutely no judgment. It's like I said, because it's not a science. It's not like, I mean, it is a science, but it's not cut and dry.
It's not perfect.
It's not perfect. So even if you do dual use, and people out there listening, that's perfectly fine. My mom dual uses right now, but you know what? Every time she vapes on that, she's not having a cigarette. So it's just one less cigarette that you're having. So there should be no stigma at all for people who are dual using. You'll get it. It'll come to you and you'll get it. So did you try, when you were smoking, did you try any other methods of quitting, like Chantix, the Nicorette gum, anything like that?
Believe it or not, I have not tried any of those methods to quit, but just various times I've been in treatment and I didn't have the ability to vape, they offered me stuff like lozenges or the patch, and being in a desperate situation, I said yes, and every single moment I always thought about having my vape, and I realized this just isn't working for me. It's like I get the nicotine, but it's not the actual sensation that I'm looking for.
Exactly.
And for me, it's a feeling of vaping that keeps me going and keeps me on vaping. Those methods, they just something about them. They weren't really hitting me in the right way.
Right. It wasn't effective. And and I think I think we've really, with vaping, have come to a perfect smoking cessation avenue, because people need to realize, and doctors and anybody who's listening needs to realize, is that smoking is not just, okay, put nicotine in your system and you won't have any cravings. It's the hand to mouth. It's the habitual stuff. It's the, okay, I just ate, so I want to pick this up, kind of thing. It's not just slap a patch on and you're getting your nicotine, so you're fine.
Oh, absolutely.
There's more psychological stuff that goes on than that. And that's why I think those things don't work for a lot of people. You kind of need that, hand to mouth, thing or whatever. And that's why I think they just don't work. They just don't work. Like, yes, you're getting your nicotine, but you're not getting the other things that satisfy your brain. So, and I've been in situations like that before too, where I've been in a hospital and people like just throw a patch on you, and I'm just like, no, and then forget the side effects that I personally got. Not everybody gets them. Excuse me. And that's great. But I think the problem of why they don't work is the other psychological things that go along with vaping or smoking that, that I was talking about. What is your, like, right now, if you had to say, what is your favorite device and what is your favorite e-liquid?
Ooh, that's tough
Well,
one.
I'll give you, like, you can do a couple. Let's just make this fun. We can do a couple.
Well, right now, what I find myself using the most is my Noisy Cricket 2. I have it topped with Recoil by none other than Grim Green.
Yes, love Nick. Nick's a great guy.
Yes, he is. And I also use a Kennedy Roundhouse 25.
And what about juices? Like, what's your flavor profile?
Flavor profile, I'd say it's probably, it's a mix between desserty or mostly desserts, sometimes candy flavors. It really depends. Right now I've been on kind of a blue raspberry kind of craze.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always constantly trying to figure out what's the best tasting for me, what's the most satisfying blue raspberry flavor out there.
And and I asked that question too because I think it's so important, like with this flavor ban that, in 2 years may or may not happen in San Francisco. Who knows? I'm sure there'll be lawsuits and all that other stuff. According to that and everything. But I don't think it's a good start. I think we could have the trickle down effect for sure. But I think it's really important because, even as, that whole thing, I don't want to get into that whole montage of, Tyler,
Right.
that whole thing, because to me it was just absolutely asinine and ridiculous. It made zero sense, let's ban menthol. Like it's ridiculous, whatever. But I think it's important because with the flavor ban, and I know they were trying to do one in New Jersey. I think there was one that got shot down a couple times in Ohio. People need to understand that, like, even with cigarettes, you could have cloves, you could have menthol, you could have tobacco. So you still had a choice of flavors. So to ban flavors altogether is just, ridiculous. It's
Right.
that's part of, the fun and part of why people are able to drop down to zero nic but still continue vaping is because of the different flavors. If it was just a tobacco or whatever cigarette, you wouldn't drop down. You would just stop smoking. But with vaping, I think it's just part of the whole thing, and the whole flavor ban thing makes zero sense whatsoever. The fact that we're even classified in that, but it keeps everything fresh and new, which then keeps people vaping and not smoking. Because when you smoked, you knew it was, for the most part, it was tobacco or menthol. Okay, which one are you? So there was no excitement. Like, yeah, it was the same thing. It's like eating pizza every single day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Eventually, you're like, okay,
you're gonna get sick of it.
Yeah, you're gonna get sick of it. But with it being smoking being an addiction, sure, like you're just not finding enjoyment in it. Not that you should find enjoyment in smoking, but it just goes to show you the addiction that you can do the same thing every single day and still do it. Like, no matter how, yes, you get the satisfaction from the nicotine, but we not only get the satisfaction from the nicotine, but it's so much healthier, 95%, if not more. And we get to choose different flavors, which is just, we're adults and it's fun and it keeps things interesting and it's great. I have one more question. Oh, so actually, I have a couple more questions. So what changes in the quality of your life, both positive and negative, have you noticed since adopting the smoke-free alternative?
Well, one thing that it didn't happen right away, granted, took a couple of months, was I was able to walk without feeling short-winded. Just my overall anxiety around situations improved. Like, I no longer had, like, if something upset me, it no longer was oh, I have to go have a cigarette or I have to go have a vape. It was, oh, well, okay.
You were able to just cope with it because you knew at
Yeah,
this point what it was.
yeah.
That's great.
Can't really think of much else that went on, but perhaps the biggest one was I was able to walk again without wheezing or panting and realizing, oh, this is kind of difficult.
Right.
So that became a lot easier.
Right. And you know what? That's great. And a lot of people, too, they say, that's what I always say, too, is that I don't care if it's just you want to start vaping just because you want to be able to go outside and play with your kids and you want to run around with your kids. And it's something that you can't do or you can't really do with enjoyment because you get exhausted in no time. That's the perfect reason. I mean, there is no wrong or right reason to do it. It's really, I mean, as long as you're of age and everything like that,
Right.
like I said, I mean, I was of the impression or of the mindset kind of for people who never smoked and picked up vaping, right? And I thought, well, why would you do that? And then at Foxwoods, I interviewed a couple girls who had never smoked, but they had huge anxiety issues. And I was like, wow, oh, like I had never thought of that. Another great reason why this vaping needs to stay. It's the overall public health thing. I mean, mental health is it is one of the most underlooked and
Right.
funded and
Underlooked,
oh my
underfunded,
god,
most
conditions.
misunderstood.
Exactly, conditions. And so if people can find through vaping a way to cope, to me that's just an added bonus as opposed to let's just throw everybody on medication. I mean, I'm medicated, I'll admit it, but I mean, I've had problems since I was like 18 years old. So I've been medicated for a while. But I'm also addicted to the medication, which is horrible, and I hear their stories and I'm like, God, if that was only around when I was having these problems, because they had almost exactly similar problems to me. And I'm like, wow, like that would have been so much better than just being medicated and being
Right.
on every medication under the world from the time you were 18. I'm now 47. So it's like, I've been on everything until you find something that works. And then it only works for a little while. And then you have to, and there's always risks and there's always side effects and there's always, and with vaping, there's not. So, I mean, I really commended those girls. I thought that was great and amazing. Because at first, when they sat down and they said, oh, I never smoked, I was like, you know what I mean? But inside, I'm going,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to do this interview. Like, oh my God. Like, and then they explained why. And I was like, and the deal and everything. And I was just like, they're like, no, it's, like they were either at 1.5s or ones and, or zeros. I mean, they weren't like, up to 24 milligrams or anything like that. And I was just like, okay, that's added bonus, like added reason why vaping needs to stay. I mean, it was just incredible. And so if you had like one thing, and this is the question that gets everybody every time, but if you had, because I know we could talk about it forever, but if you had one thing to say to your state representatives, and obviously you're not from San Francisco, but you're from California, what do you think is the most important thing that they need to know? And if you were in front of them, what would you say? No holds barred.
I could go on with this, but perhaps I would say the biggest thing is that vaping, it's not tobacco. It's harm reduction, and ultimately, it's small business. That's what it is. And to look past the stigmatism that that vaping really has brought on in California. That it is helping people quit smoking. It's helping people better their lives, change their lives. It helped change my life. definitely, and that all these regulations, uh, like flavor bannings, it's hurting the economy here. I mean, we already are suffering from a bit of a bad economy,
Right.
so to keep vaping alive and the industry alive in the state, it will not only help the economy, but ultimately it will help public health overall.
Well, John, this was great. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add, or?
No, nothing that I can think of.
Okay. I just find it amazing. And like I said, you're another example of something new. So when people say to me, no, my vape story is the same, it's not the same. You're the first person that I've talked to that says, well, I was only smoking for 6 months and then I figured it out. That's amazing. That is so amazing. So, everybody who, like I said, who gives their vape story, your vape story is so important because there might be people like you, John. You're the perfect example of someone
Right.
who, hey, you know what? I picked it up after 6 months. I was noticing some of this icky stuff. I didn't really like it. I got introduced to this, and wham, there you go.
Absolutely, and I know I don't fall into what's typically seen as the average age of vapors. I mean, I'm only 25 myself right now.
Right.
So I'm pretty young. Just to have the opportunity to start vaping to better my life, to get off cigarettes, I'm really thankful that I had that opportunity, that I continue to have that opportunity. To me, if all these bans go in place, then that's ultimately taking away my opportunity to better my health. And will I go back to cigarettes? I don't know at this point. I will be honest, I have had thoughts. I've seen packs of cigarettes and thought, oh, I could smoke one of those right now.
Well, right.
And that just goes to show that the addiction still is there for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not it's not as strong, but it's still present.
Right. So at that point, you would just have to give it up to willpower or whatever and say,
Absolutely.
I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of people wwho would. And there's plenty of people who say, absolutely, I would go back to smoking. And that's scary. I just want to urge everybody, the website for Very Vocal Vapers is now live. As John knows, he booked this story through that website. When we were off the air, he had said it was really easy, super easy. So, that's how you can do it if you cannot make it to a convention. The next one I will be at is Houston, unless something before then, comes up. But is going to be Houston showcase. And so I hope to see everybody that I can there. And if you cannot make it, I encourage you, please go on the website. It's Very Vocal Vapers. It'll be underneath, in the description of this video, but veryvocalvapers.org. And look around. There's a lot of information. I'm adding new shops that you can vape at, because there's, of course, a donation button. All donations go to advocacy. And every month I will be posting on the Facebook page, the receipt of, what advocacy organization it went to. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to stick with one or I'm going to do, other ones. But ultimately, it's all going to advocacy. And if you cannot donate at this time, but you still plan on buying vape gear or buying juice, buy it through those links, because that's, a part of that goes, back to me, which then goes back into advocacy. So, so thanks, John. It was awesome talking to you. Thank you very much for sharing your vape story. And like I said, your vape story could be that story that hits somebody and they go, oh, I just started picking these up, 2 weeks ago. Look at this kid, like no, I don't need this. And so that's amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for letting me share.
Absolutely.